I welcome to the third National Forest Martyrs Day Memorial Lecture. Conservation has always been India's calling. The Aranyakas of the Vedic era to the conservationism of today's time are a reflection of Indian cultural ethos. Conservation sounds reassuring, rejuvenating, and peaceful. But as peace demands the most heroic labor and the most difficult sacrifice, numerous individuals have gone beyond the call of the duty to preserve it. Defending and preserving peace sometimes lead to the supreme sacrifice, the sacrifice of life. Over the years, numerous personnel of Forest Department have lost their lives in the service of forest and wildlife protection. The pious cause and the undefeatable commitment shown makes them the martyrs and honored value in itself. In recognition of the exemplary valor, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has declared the 11th of September as National Forest Martyrs Day. 11th of September marks the year 1730 when over 300 people of the Bishnoi community lost their lives in Rajasthan, an event that is viewed as the marker of the modern day environmentalism in India. As martyrdom has no compartmentalization, and as our forest department staff do selfless protection, it is also a humble effort to pay homage to every martyr of this brave land. The timeless sacrifice by the defense personnel while guarding the nation's border and preserving the peace makes them martyrs. We, as a fraternity, have a firm belief that these sacrifices and principles upheld will continue to inspire us. As we come together to commemorate their selfless deeds, I feel privileged to welcome India's first Chief of Defence Staff and Secretary of Department of Military Affairs, General Bipin Rawat, the chief guest of the function. Sir will be joining shortly with us over the WebEx platform. I gratefully welcome Shri Bharat Jyoti, the Director of Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy, Shri Sushil Kumar Avasthi, the Additional Director of Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy, Shri Mukul Trivedi, Professor at IGNFA, Shri N.C. Saravanan, the Course Director of IFS Batch 2020, heads of sister institutions and organizations, dear faculty members, the senior IFS officers, the esteemed guests, and the IFS probationers of the 2020 batch. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. As we wait for our esteemed guest, I would like to draw the attention on the relentless sacrifices of the personnel of the Forest Department. According to the International Rangers Federation, India accounts for 31% of the total forest ranger deaths in the world. They are a shining example of the committed forest governance. IGNFA, as the alma mater of the IFS personnel, also pay homage to the sacrifices of our 3 IFS officers who laid their life for the service of their mandate. Late Shri P. Srinivas of Karnataka cadre lost his life while handling Veerappan, the dreaded bee. Late Shri Sanjay Kumar Singh of Bihar cadre lost life while heroically countering the mining mafia. And late Shri S. Manikandan of Karnataka cadre left this world while handling the human-wildlife conflict. These Indian Forest Service officers who have laid their life to keep those promises to protect Mother Nature by giving their heart and soul to this service and work tirelessly. As we pay our tributes, we wish to inherit their traits while pursuing our duty. Our chief guest will be joining shortly with us.
Mr. Tiwari, can you hear me? तिवारी जी, आप मुझे सुन पा रहे हैं?
यस मैम, आपकी आवाज आ रही है क्या मैम?
जी आ रही है, बिल्कुल आ रही है। मैं सर को रिक्वेस्ट करना चाह रही थी आपकी तरफ से कि सर का वेलकम है, सर को ज्वाइन करा ले प्लीज। आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
यस मैम।
Welcome, sir. I deem it as an honor and privilege to present a brief life profile of Honorable General Bipin Rawat. Sir was born in Pauri, Uttarakhand, and is an alumnus of St. Edward's School, Shimla, and the National Defence Academy. While graduating from the Indian Military Academy, Dehradun, Sir was awarded the coveted Sword of Honor. Sir was commissioned in the year 1978 in the Gorkha Rifles of the Infantry. Sir has a vast operational experience. Sir commanded the infantry battalion along the line of actual control in the eastern sector and the Rashtriya Rifle sector in the Kashmir Valley. Sir has also commanded a multinational brigade in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Sir has also commanded over various operations in the erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir, the Northeast, and the operations in the desert sector. Sir has held several important instructional appointments, including the instructional tenure at IMA Dehradun. Sir is also academically inclined and has earned degrees from prestigious Defence Services Staff College, Wellington. Sir has a doctorate for his research in military media strategic studies. For the distinguished service rendered over the span of 42 years of the service, Sir has been conferred with several presidential awards, namely Param Vishisht Seva Medal, Uttam Yuddha Seva Medal, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, to name a few. Besides these, Sir has been awarded with the Chief of Army Staff Commendation on 2 occasions. Sir was also awarded Force Commander's Commendations 2 times while serving with the UN in Congo. Sir was the Chief of Army Staff from 2016 to 2019, the most decorated post in the Indian Army. Sir currently holds the most prestigious position in the Defence Tri Services as the Chief of Defence Staff. We feel honored to welcome India's first Chief of Defence Staff to the National Forest Martyrs Day Memorial Lecture in Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy. We welcome you, sir. I now request the Director of Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy for the introductory speech.
Chief of Defence Staff, respected General Rawat, distinguished guests who have joined virtually or who would be auditing the recorded version of this interaction, additional director and faculty colleagues of IGNFA, my dear young friends, the probationer trainees of Indian Forest Service, and the trainees from Bhutan. We have assembled on this solemn day that symbolizes and signifies the noble virtues of selfless and self-sacrificing valor for the society and the nation. Many members from different creeds and cadres of foresters, from foot soldiers in the form of forest guards, the cattle watchers, the range forest officers, the wildlife trackers, assistant conservator of forest, divisional forest officers, and even conservator of forest and higher echelons of the service go beyond their normal call of duty for the cause of protection of forests and the entities and values associated with the forests. In such outstanding endeavors, on many occasions, they are inflicted with grievous or fatal consequences to the extent of becoming lifelong invalid or even losing their lives. The exemplary acts of bravery and sacrifices of the foresters were not collectively recognized by the nation till recent past. The foresters also have been valiantly fighting the threats by anti-social elements to the internal security of the country in a way, because the security of natural systems and ecological and environmental functions and values are equally crucial for the peace and security of the country in myriad ways that all of us have realized now. Realizing the supremely noble virtue akin to the patriotism of the members of defense forces, border security forces, paramilitary and police forces, fire servicemen, and members of other such professions, we have recently started paying homage and tribute to the Martyrs foresters on this day, who have made sacrifices that have intimate relation with the security of natural systems and entities. Today, for the third Forest Martyrs lecture, we are proud and feel honored to have General Rawat to deliver a lecture for the IFS probationers and also for the benefit of other participants and the foresters fraternity and the IGNFA community. Sir, as Chief of Defence Staff and the first incumbent of this new position, a position that steers and coordinates the complexities of three defense forces and other players in the security and safety of nation, you are holding one of the overarching responsibility for the national security in the broadest connotation. We are eager to listen to your thoughts and ideas on this occasion, coming from your lived experiences of bravery, valor, chivalry, strategic prowess, leadership, fortitude, and arduous, selfless, and sacrificing times in your own career. That is still enduring. The Academy is grateful for your kind favor of bestowing on us this opportunity of interaction, which will remain in our memory for days to come. I am sure the probationers will be immensely inspired by your talk today to nurture and inculcate the virtues of valor, the virtues of bravery, the virtue of courage of conviction, perseverance, fortitude, tolerance, and patience, and other such attributes in their careers of 3 and more decades ahead. Jai Banpal and Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for the address. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the most awaited moment. I request Honorable Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, to deliver the memorial address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Sri Bharat Jyoti, the Director of Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy, faculty members, invitees from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and dear Indian Forest Service probationers, trainee officers, a very good morning to all of you. It is indeed a privilege for me to be present here amongst you all for the National Forest Martyrs Day lecture that is being organized by the Academy. And even before I begin, let me, with all the humility, on behalf of the entire Armed Forces fraternity, convey my gratitude to every forester, each one of you who is involved with the conservation of our environment and our ecology, because of the yeoman service that you all have been doing in protecting the environment and ecology, our forests, our flora, fauna, and indeed our wildlife. We would also like to utilize this opportunity to pay homage and respect to all the forest officials, no matter where they have been serving, who have dedicated themselves and have sacrificed their lives in the line of duty. We do understand you are facing tremendous challenges, dealing with poachers, smugglers, and at times even by attacks from the wildlife, for whom actually you are actually sacrificing yourselves to protect them, yet you do not hesitate to face their attacks very peacefully and with great honor. Today, I would like to actually address you in two parts. In the first part, I will touch upon the environmental protection and sustainability adopted by the armed forces. And thereafter, in the second part, I will talk about the leadership skills required for the 21st century. Now, as far as the Indian Armed Forces are concerned, you know, the Indian Military Academy and your institute are practically co-located. So we understand each other very well. And therefore, we have embraced a paradigm shift in the environmental management and protection. Though the primary role of the armed forces is to safeguard the nation and to protect its citizens against internal as well as external aggression, environmental degradation and climate change have become an additional challenge for all of us. It is desired to have an appropriate response mechanism at the working level to counter these threats. And therefore, in this, I think we have to work very closely with your organization. Climate change is a very relevant issue across the world, and this needs urgent attention at all levels. The challenges due to climate change are increasing, and its impacts are becoming more apparent in view of the scale and frequency of the natural disasters that are affecting us day by day. The armed forces have therefore embraced climate change as a critical area of our security paradigm. In fact, in 2017, the Joint Doctrine of the Indian Armed Forces outlined that if environmental degradation and related issues increase, the military will need to respond. The doctrine lists out a series of non-traditional security challenges linked to the environment that could influence conflict and wars, including climate change, ecosystem disruption, energy issues, population issues, food-related problems, economic issues of unsustainable modes of production, and civil strife related to the environment. Therefore, the priority area for our armed forces is to comply with the government policies on environment protection. Climate change is emerging indeed as one of the greatest challenges to humanity. Firm steps therefore have to be taken to improve its sustainability and efficiency. Some of the major initiatives that have been taken by our armed forces include afforestation on defense lands and other degraded areas. And in the last 3 decades, our ecological task force battalions have planted and cared for over 6 crore saplings and covered more than 70,000 hectares of land with a 70 to 80% survival rate. And since you are living so close to Mussoorie, you have seen how the greening of the Mussoorie hills has happened because of the ecological task force battalions of the Indian Army. The Territorial Army's ecological task force was first set up in 1982 as the world's first ecological battalion. From saving deforested hills to transforming abandoned lands into lush green forests, the ETF has done it all. Then is the introduction of renewable sources of energy. To contribute towards achieving India's energy and environmental goals, our armed forces are coming up with ways to get rid of dependence on the use of fossil fuels, especially in the operational areas. For instance, the Indian Navy is demonstrating its commitment to the Indian Navy Environment Conservation Roadmap by completing a 3 megawatt plant at the Indian Naval Academy in Ezimala and 2 megawatt plants at the naval station at Karanjia near Mumbai and at Kalinga Naval Station very close to Visakhapatnam. Similarly, the Indian Army recently inaugurated the first green solar energy plant in the state of Sikkim, seeking to harness renewable energy for the benefit of the troops working in very remote areas. We're also looking at waste management initiatives. And here we have undertaken large number of initiatives to manage the waste, especially in our operational areas. Just as an example, in 2019, the Indian Army took an initiative to remove nearly 130 tons of solid waste from the Siachen Glacier area to protect the ecosystem. So you can see that the Indian Armed Forces are working very closely with the forest officials to see how we can protect the environment and prevent this degradation any further. I mean, you all are well conversant and have taken the lead in this, and therefore we want to be closely associated with you in this field. I will now get on to the leadership skills that are required for the 21st century. Now, leadership in any organization inspires people by providing a purpose and direction to the people you lead. It seeks to accomplish the mission while concurrently striving to improve the organization. The leader is required to motivate his men and women to be prepared to follow orders, which may result in putting one's own life at stake. This is as true as the battlefield in the face of enemy, as it is true in the deep jungles in the presence of predatory animals where you all operate. It is very common to debate the age-old adage, that is, are leaders born or are they made? This, however, does not hold true for leaders in the military. Time and again, the aphorism has been proven wrong by military leaders who thought conscious and relentless efforts have developed leadership traits and applied these most significantly in the challenging circumstances. Therefore, any organization has to have a vision, and therefore vision is the sense of purpose that you want in any organization, with everyone focused on the same ends that they have to achieve. We in the military call it our mission. What is essentially required is not only that everybody must have the sense of purpose, but everybody must be committed to it. Therefore, as policy leaders in your future avatar, having a vision, clearly articulating the vision and setting a climate within which people can be successful are essential elements for any successful leader. Going a step ahead, leadership 4.0, or if I may say, digital leadership, would demand a good understanding of the digital world and a visionary mindset to manage digital disruption. Formulating a vision is different for different organizations. In the military, junior and middle rank officers engage in direct leadership. The leaders look at the teams in the eyes, talk to them, and can do that routinely because of the closeness and proximity between the leader and the led. Senior commanders, on the other hand, exercise direct leadership, but the systems enabling the transition from direct to indirect leadership are well founded and have proven well in past wars that we have faced. The ability to make that transition is crucial to leading a large organization. And as senior civil servants of Government of India, with many thousands of staff, the leader is not going to have a personal relationship with all the employees, yet the message you convey and communicate is going to affect everybody on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, communication between the leader and the led become important. In the military, communication, the commander's intent, is a key facet of leadership. An organization must be clear on what is the leader's intent. But in the current milieu, the number of echelons at which the commander's intent must be understood has expanded from the past, wherein it was felt that people needed to understand the commander's intent just 2 levels down. However, in the information age, this may not be adequate, and every person in the organization needs to understand the intent, especially when there are all kinds of feeds that are coming in, particularly disruptors through the social media. Now, building consensus throughout an organization is therefore equally important. Senior commanders, in our case, is one such example where the commander-in-chief for the services meet and hash out a plan for the services, where everyone has the opportunity to contribute their suggestions, amend proposals, and work through disagreements. We have to work through disagreements because you cannot always work on consensus. And I think any kind of criticism which will help in improving the organization must be acceptable. We must therefore utilize the opportunity to contribute suggestions, amend proposals, and work through these disagreements. However, once the debate and discussion is done, everybody takes ownership of the vision and close ranks to execute the same. Now, we also have to be accepting responsibility and build trust within an organization. The price of greatness, said Winston Churchill, is responsibility. I feel one of the hardest part of leadership is the associated responsibility, particularly in our profession in uniform. When you realize that a leader, you are responsible for the performance of your outfit or your organization and all of its members, both on and off duty. Everything they do and everything they fail to do. The highest form of responsibility is the responsibility of life of your output. And if a life is lost, then the responsibilities of looking after the fallen hero's family is the last, remains the task of the leader. Another important aspect of leadership is the commitment to develop your subordinates as future leaders. Accepting responsibility for the team's action is reflective of your commitment, and it somehow develops those who choose to accept your leadership. This in turn leads to a kind of dynamic interaction between the leader and the led. which on maturation over time builds trust. Trust is probably the single most important quality developed in the soldier's creed. We never leave a fallen comrade behind. The man knows that even if maimed, his leader and comrades will carry him back on his backs. That is the level of trust in a soldier's creed. This implies that as the leader, never letting the subordinates and the organization down. Remember, trust is a two-way thing between the leader and the led. The moral strength in a unit comes from faith in the ranks that they are being wisely directed, and from the faith at the top that orders will be obeyed implicitly. Now, therefore, how do you manage diversity and change in the present day environment? Today's leaders have to lead to diverse talent, diversity in terms of region, language, beliefs, orientation, education levels, technology adaptation, and so on and so forth. It is incumbent on all leaders to gain a better understanding of what makes up the team, the members' background, and subsequently how best can we lead them. For people like me, having spent majority of my military life with my generation and the Generation X, the millennials, who today form the bulk of our armed forces, adds to a unique mix of aspirations, imbibed values, societal changes, and indeed the stresses that go along with it. Connecting via smartphones, higher awareness levels despite less reading of books and newspapers, forming relationships on social media in the digital world, vis-a-vis my generation, wherein we were called up on a landline phone or maybe wrote a letter to our parents once in a month. Well, this also implies that the young soldiers are very quick on the uptake and can handle niche technologies, are excellent at innovation and communication, but yet on the other hand, vulnerable to the adversaries' nefarious designs executed in the cyber domain and through the social media platforms. Thus, as 21st century leaders, you would need to establish both the working environment and the culture that facilitates openness, collaboration, constant learning, and indeed innovative thinking. The challenges I see before you would be to manage change, retaining the organization's values and ethos while trying to do so. Therefore, what is the mantra for maximizing leadership? My first mantra for you would be to have a voracious appetite to learn. We in the military believe that professional knowledge and professional competence is the sine qua non of leadership. Knowledge has to be acquired the hard way, and the seat of leadership does not make a repository of wisdom. Futuristic and philosopher Alvin Toffler once wrote, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And I unquote. Second mantra that I would like to propagate is to have an unyielding commitment to values. As leaders of the century, you must do what is right and never compromise your faith to fit in. Do not conform to the ways of the world or condone sin. We in the military call it moral courage, the ability to distinguish right for wrong and have the courage to stand up and take ownership for your doing. Third mantra is to have a resolute mindset to embrace change. The environment is going to be all about change. Nobody thought that a coronavirus of micron size would be such a disruptor. Very often these changes would be forced upon us, whether we like them or not, and effective leaders should not therefore resist change. They must be prepared to embrace it. We in the military know that we are not perfect We therefore constantly dialogue and introspect, and through long conversations with our rank and file, we subject our ethos to an intense critique for necessary adaptation. Our ethos is also one that abhors dogmas, for we know only too well it is only by recognizing change we will be in a position to exploit the opportunities that lie ahead. And my final mantra is that all of you leaders must have humility. As leaders, you must believe in the value of quiet, understated excellence, in underperforming and always over-delivering. As Anand Glasgow says, and I quote, "A good leader takes a time more than his share of the blame, a little less than his share of the credit." And I unquote. Empathy and compassion, peppered with humility, will always create a positive environment where the organization and the workforce both will thrive and create a multiplier effect. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to highlight that the Indian Armed Forces have indeed played a stellar role and an important role in protecting the earth and its natural resources. They are geared to do by virtue of their organizational structure, training, leadership, motivation, technical skills, mobility, and intercommunication. This potential is exemplified by the work of the armed forces in such fields as forestation, the use of renewable energy, anti-pollution measures, and economy in the use of resources, especially energy, water, and food. As for leadership, it isn't always easy. Leadership is also rarely a solo performance. Indeed, it is the product of social relationships wherein strong leaders catalyze cooperation among the team and the environment. The Bhagavad Gita says that if a leader is a karam yogi, the followers will continue to do their karam and dutifully perform their responsibilities. Lord Krishna therefore exhorts Arjun to fulfill the duty to protect dharma, as this would set the example for many other worthy and noble warriors to perform their prescribed duty of protecting righteousness for the benefit of the entire human race and the welfare of the world. And here, ladies and gentlemen, I am reminded of an incident that was quoted by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, when he joined his company, joined along with another co-worker working for a $2 salary per day. Steve Jobs and his co-worker was also called by the name of Steve. They started working in this company about 35 years ago, and they used to get $2 a day. Now, one fine day, very recently, Steve Jobs came to the company in his huge limousine. He called out at the other Steve who had started working with him, who was now a supervisor in the same company. And he called him, "Hey, Steve, come here." And this second Steve, other Steve who was working with him earlier 35 years ago, ran and sat down in his limousine. Steve Jobs took him to a restaurant, fed him to lunch, and after about half an hour, left him back at the factory premises. Now, all the other co-workers then gathered around the second Steve and asked him, "How come you know the owner of the company, Steve Jobs?" And this Steve mentioned that Steve Jobs and myself joined this company as laborers 35 years ago, and both of us were earning a salary of $2 per day. He says, I was working in the company for $2 per day, whereas Steve Jobs was not working for $2, he was working for the company. And therefore today he owns this company. That lies the difference between when you work for your money that you earn or you work for the organization which you serve. This, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, is the art of leadership. And finally, I would like to applaud the Department of Forests and Wildlife for having rendered commendable service to the nation by protecting its natural resources. We as a society should commemorate those who discharge their duties in adverse conditions and it forms the obligation of every responsible citizen to join hands with the Forest Department personnel in conserving our natural green cover and in protecting our biodiversity. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words and thoughts, I convey my best wishes to everyone, especially the probationer training officers, for the future assignments and endeavors. Good luck and Godspeed. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for the insightful address. We would meaningfully incorporate learnings from the address in our professional lives. We look forward towards an opportunity to hear you again, sir. Sir, with your kind permission, I would like to request for a small interaction with the Indian Forest Service probationers of the 2020 batch.
Sure, they can start.
I now request Ms. Pooja Nagle for the interaction.
Good morning, sir. My name is Pooja Nagle, and I'm going to. My name is Pooja Nagle, and I'm going to Madhya Pradesh cadre. My question is that army is an epitome of sacrifice, but sometimes it is required to keep the national interest above yourself. So, how do you keep yourself motivated to keep the country above everything?
Yes, as I mentioned, motivation and keeping the soldiers who we command motivated is very much a responsibility of the leader. And the motivation comes because of the teamwork in which we form organizations. We ensure that a soldier becomes a part of the team and he's cared for. In fact, his organization becomes his family. And we also ensure that we have a very good support system for the families of the soldiers, because when they are out in the field deployed on the borders, their families are cared for. So the soldier working on the borders does not have to worry about the family back home. And yet at the same time, should he sacrifice his life in the line of duty or get maimed, we make sure that we care for the family or for that disabled maimed soldier throughout his life. Therefore, we have created paraplegic homes and centers where soldiers who get maimed are cared for. When the soldier dies or sacrifices his life on the line of duty, his family is provided for. The children are educated at our expense, and we make sure that the family is able to sustain themselves. So a soldier is not worried about what will happen to his near and dear ones after he passes away. And I think that is what keeps us going. And the other thing is, we believe a lot in Naam, Namak, and Nishan. A soldier fights for his regimental flag. We all have a regimental motto and a flag. He fights for that flag because no soldier will ever allow his flag to be captured by the adversary or his flag to ever fall to the ground. So these are some of the motivating scriptures that we have come out with, some of the leadership skills that we have developed, which help us in motivating our soldiers. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I now request Shri M. Raja for the interaction.
Sir. So on this day, when we pay homage and respect to the forest martyrs, my question is, sir, what type of an institutional mechanism, better coordination between the forest department, the police, and the other departments which are involved in controlling the wildlife or forest related crimes, so that on a continuous basis, on an established institutional mechanism basis, we can deal in a coordinated manner, sir? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because, we also live in areas where there are forest cover. I belong to Uttarakhand, and we do have leopard attacks and we have elephant attacks and all kinds of things. We also see a lot of poachers, people who are smuggling forest produce. So I know what the forest guards and the forest officials, the forest rangers, your TFOs, your WPOs, and everybody else, what they go through, right up to the top leadership. And I think one thing is to empower them through legislation, empower them by providing some security wherewithal with which they can defend themselves and make sure that no harm comes to them. At the same time, I think Since they operate in isolated pockets and they operate in small numbers, communication, in fact, I would say that the police and the military, if it is close by, may be a good option, that if we are able to evolve communication between the two, so that should they require any help at any one time because they are in small teams and they find that they are not able to deal with the situation, they should be in a position to summon the police, military, or anybody else who's present, who's in a position to provide support to them. So if you are able to develop this kind of a communication network, which is now possible, with the mobile communication spreading, everything else happening, if this kind of a methodology can be involved, and I think FRI IMA is a very good place where FRIMA can work together and get this kind of a process moving. I think these are some of the changes and I would say transformational developments that we need to look into. Because we see your forest guards, now you got lady forest guards, of course you have armed them, but yet they are isolated. The poachers have got very sophisticated weapons. These people who are moving around, the animals, of course, we're not supposed to be killing this wildlife, but at the same time, at times in self-protection, you may have to take some action. And should you need some help, I think anybody there should be able to come to your support.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I now request Sri Revati Raman for the interaction.
You elaborately described the green initiatives of defense forces. Through various reports, we have also known that defense sector has worked in various other activities like desert restoration, slope stabilization, check dams creation in Uttarakhand and in Rajasthan and other parts of this country. So, sir, my question is that is there any long-term vision? What's the long-term vision of defense sector in contribution towards India's achieving its NDC, nationally determined goals towards sustainable development? And the second part is how far environment concerns are taken care while planning for defense infrastructure, locational details, personnel deployment, timing and types of weaponry used in operations to minimize environmental degradation and
Yes, as far as the armed forces are concerned, we are taking strong measures to ensure that the environment does not get degraded. Yet at the same time, I would not hesitate in saying that we also degrade the environment. Because, when we carry out our firings with especially heavy weapons, this leads to degradation of the environment, especially the target areas where these rounds fall. So what we are doing is we are getting involved in a very big way in compensatory afforestation. We have asked the government to identify areas where we can do compensatory afforestation for the kind of degradation that the armed forces do by virtue of the fact that, we carry out firing in ranges. But now the other thing is that wherever we are carrying out infrastructure development, especially where the roads are being constructed, especially along the northern borders, the degradation of the environment does take place. So we have now been informed, and we have also taken on to ourselves that wherever we are carrying out this degradation because of the construction of roads and other infrastructure, simultaneous restoration of the landform will be carried out. So we are now finding ways and means of seeing how best we can, retain the landform, carry out some kind of afforestation. Planting trees is very difficult because it takes time for the trees to grow. So we are now trying to see whether we can start with growing of bushes, which can lead to soil stabilization, while simultaneously we plant trees so that we can prevent rock falls and landslides from taking place. We are also looking at now, getting some wire meshes and plastic meshes which are being used internationally, so that wherever you build a road or you carry out infrastructure development where the ecology is getting disrupted, you are able to prevent further disruption of the ecology by putting these nets, fixing these nets in those areas to prevent landslides and rock falls. So these are modern technologies that we are applying. At the same time, the blast that we carry out with our explosives, we are now going in for explosives which do not create too much of the disruption in the environment there. And therefore, we are trying to use silent explosives which can only break the rocks without creating that explosive or that explosion. So a lot of measures are being taken to mitigate the effects of degradation of the environment. At the same time, we have also been told that wherever we are developing buildings, the green norms have to be followed. Second, in as much of the forest cover has to remain protected. And if required, we may have to even replant those same trees by shifting them elsewhere. In fact, if you look at Delhi now, the way the Parliament House is coming up and the vista is being developed, the same trees are being moved away and being replanted elsewhere. So a lot of measures are being taken to ensure that this degradation does not happen. And the armed forces have also been instructed, and we are also following these directions in letter and spirit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your knowledgeable and interesting interaction with us. Now I request the additional professor and member secretary of the Academic Council of Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy, Madam Nidhi Srivastava, to propose a vote of thanks for the National Forest Martyrs Day Memorial Lecture.
Thank you, Arushi. I feel honored to vote of thanks on behalf of Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy. First of all, I convey my deepest gratitude and thanks to Chief Guest of today's function, Honorable General Bipin Rawat, Chief of Defence Staff, for his kind consent and gracious presence on this virtual event. Thank you so much, sir, for your inspirational and enlightening address and also enriching interaction with the IFS probationers. I'm sure that probationers at the beginning of their career would immensely benefit from your inspirational and motivational message, sir. And it's very heartening to know your deep concerns and awareness of the armed forces about the environmental degradation and the kind of remedies which has been taken to minimize and mitigate it, sir. Thank you so much for this presence. My sincere thanks to all the dignitaries and invited guests for gracing the occasion with their presence. Thank you, one and all. I also thank Shri Bharat Jyoti, Director, Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy, Shri Sushil Kumar Avasthi, Additional Director and Professor Academics, Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy, for their guidance and valuable contribution in organizing this session. My special thanks also goes to Brigadier L.S. Lidder and Captain Robin Chakrabarti and other officials of the Office of CDS for all their support in coordinating and organizing this event. Thank you, sirs, in absentia. And my thanks goes to all my faculty members of Indira Gandhi National Forest Academy for their presence and participation. Last but not the least, I also thank IFS probationers of 2020 IFS batch for their active participation in this session. And a special thanks to all the support staff and IT cell for organizing this virtual event uninterrupted. Thank you one and all for today's session. Jai Hind.